So I tell people to do here, if you want to join in, you can unmute yourself and, contribute at any time. We're winding down here. Basically, the girls' regular season ends this week. The boys' regular season ends next week. Girls' districts, boys' district coming up, and hope everyone's had a successful season. What we want to do today, first is just cover just some tips for the tournament, because even though we can work now with partners, you often are working with people that you maybe have never seen before or never worked with before. So you want to cover some tournament tips, and then get into some basketball myths and things like that, for the newer officials, that things that are common mistakes of new officials that can get you into trouble. And a lot of these items I'm going to cover are items that actually went out in an NCAA bulletin that I sort of cherry picked that are appropriate for high school. And these are some things that can, I think, you probably need to cover in your pre-games as you get into the tournament, or in any time you're working with people you don't know. One of the items that the NCAA is having issues with, and we should be concerned with, is hand checking and body bumping the ball handler. Rick, has taught me, and this is something I always use in my pre-games, is if we protect our ball handlers and our shooters, the game will go okay, because that's where everyone's looking, at the ball handlers and the shooters. So you don't want to let them get beat up and miss things. And the big thing here, again, if you let it start out physical on the perimeter, it'll deteriorate everywhere. Coaches will be screaming at you to call hand checking, or they'll be signaling, using their arms, hand check and forearms. They'll be showing you that. And of course, when they're on defense, they'll be pushing things to the limit. The real big thing is when a ball handler is trying to turn the corner or get by a defender, if they're being impeded by hands or forearms. You want to make sure you get that. Talking about post play and this is one of the more important things, is call the first displacement foul. A lot of times the offensive player will come in and stick his butt into the defender and knock him 2 feet off the block to set up. Well, get that. Don't wait for the defender to clutch and grab to get back in position. That initial contact is what you need to be looking for and getting when the post player is coming to set up. What you see here are some tips that the NCAA people give. The lead, mirror the ball, and you can, if you're mirroring the ball in a 3-man game, rotating when the ball goes, the opposite side, or the players go to the opposite side, you're in a good position to catch that first displacement foul. But sometimes it isn't the offensive player, sometimes it's the defensive player pushing the offensive player off the block. But get the first one before things get dirty. I think there isn't a basketball meeting anywhere that doesn't go by where traveling isn't, a point of concern. And, the tip is find the pivot foot. if you know the pivot foot, you'll get traveling every time, and you won't call false travelings. Travels occur basically at the start of a dribble, where they start running before they release the ball, or at the end of a dribble, where they don't stop running after they catch the ball. Those are your main areas. Occasionally in a pivot at the lower level, they'll switch pivot foots or they'll drag a pivot foot, but really the start and finish of a dribble. Screening's another point of emphasis that the NCAA wants to clean up now. Really on this, if you're not officiating on the ball, don't be ball watching if the ball isn't in your primary. Usually it's the off-ball official who can catch the illegal screens. A lot of times they say here in the second point here, a lot of times the post player moving up to the foul line or top of the key to set the screens. Once again, if it's a blind screen where the defensive player doesn't see the screen coming, they've got to have, a step. If it's stationary, they have to have enough time to avoid it, and a step, maybe two if they're moving quickly. Most screens in a half court set aren't that quick, but the defender has to have the ability to avoid a screen for it to be legal. One thing you see a lot here is a too wide a screen. And what you mean by that is the screener's legs have to be within the frame of his shoulders. So you'll see a lot of times the screener doesn't set up in the ideal position, or even more often the dribbler starts to move around the screen too quickly or moves too far away from the screener, and you'll see the screener stick a foot out, or his feet will be wide and the defender will trip over the screener's feet. That's an illegal screen if the feet are outside the frame of his body for the screener. So that's another heads up area that can get you into trouble. And again, as you get into the tournament, cover these in your pre-games. You're often working with people you don't normally work with. So these are items that you should really, really make sure to discuss. In the last couple of weeks, I've seen more of the defenders here trying to blow up the screen, and some of it's just the function of it being this time of year where players are, most teams' fates are decided and they're not interested so much in clean play and sportsmanship, so they might purposely drill a screener. And I think I've called more of that in the last 2 weeks than I did in the first 10. Again, if anyone wants to chime in on any of these points, just do so. Unmute yourself and contribute. There are a lot of veteran officials here who can contribute a lot, and even some younger officials might have questions or want to have play scenarios to run by.
Jim, I got something.
Yeah.
With any approach to officiating, the golden rule is to start early with it. Don't take an attitude, we'll see what happens, and then start calling hand checks. You can get too far into it. Now, it's okay to warn early, but when they violate, nothing stops them like calling one. My experience is if you get one out in the open where everybody in the gym can see it, That's a great one to start with.
Absolutely true. It never gets better if you let it go. It only gets better if you address it. And that goes too with bench decorum. And again, this is something that the NCAA people are having issues with. You know, call the deserved technical foul. If you're not calling technicals, you're probably not doing your job, because, you know, there's more poor sportsmanship, I think, than good sportsmanship on overall. There's on every team, it seems like there's, you know, one player, one coach. It needs to be addressed. This is an NCAA point here about too many head coaches coming on the floor, being in front of the table. And that is an issue at the high school. You know, God love him, Tim Wasilka at Clarkston. Nice coach, never says anything to officials, but he's wandering almost to the other bench these days. And, you know, you almost need to put a rope around him and pull him back, you know, to the bench area. And there are a lot of coaches like that. A lot of teams too with newer coaches. You might see 2, 3 assistant coaches standing up. Well, the only coach that can stand up during play is the head coach. You know, now if someone gets up to, you know, just momentarily, whatever. But if they're standing up, you know, coaching, they're not supposed to be. Just the head coach is the only one who should be standing. And again, players, you know, we should have, I think, a low tolerance for players now. And I alert especially, you know, the JV officials, because a lot of these JV players, the next 10 days or the last 10 days, they'll play organized basketball in their life. And, you know, if they're not going to win the game, they want to win the, you know, the manlyhood battle. So you got to watch out. And don't let it go unaddressed. Again, this is more another, you know, surprisingly, you'd think at the NCAA level that they wouldn't have, you know, to teach some things in 3-person mechanics, but here we are. This is again direct from the NCAA coordinator of officials bulletin. Trust your partner. And I've heard this for years, and it's proven true by the NBA, who, you know, has staff who analyzes this and does percentages on missed calls. When you leave your primary and make a call in someone else's one of your partner's primaries, percentage of missed calls goes up dramatically. So don't reach unless it's a play that you know you're 100% right on and has to be called. One of the points they make is that lead officials in 3-person are calling fouls on the other side of the basket, across the paint.
Jim, I'm guilty there.
Yeah, I
That's
think
been
we all
the
are.
toughest, the toughest thing for me to stay off of, you know, working all the 2-man years ago, that you had to have that, but you got to lay off. You're wrong more than you're right. You don't see the full play because you've got something in front of you on your half of the lane, typically, that's blocking you.
Yeah. And this is especially true. They talk about plays at the rim. You know, as the lead, you've got to kind of look through the backboard sometimes to get these. and look through players, the trail and the center have a much better view of, the contact up high on their sides of the floor. Whether, it was all ball or whether the defender, coming from behind hit the body first and then hit the ball. So the rule of thumb here is don't guess, trust your partners. If you are going to go across the floor, have a very slow whistle. Give your partner a chance to call it and give yourself time to think about it and say, am I certain I'm right here? And again, in two-person, you do have to make those calls because your trail may be way behind the play. But even then, at the rim, sometimes give your partner a chance to make the call and give yourself more time to digest. Whether it's the right call or not, to make a call on a play going to the rim on the opposite side of the, of the lane. Any questions on anything we've covered? Anyone want to raise any point? Just go ahead and unmute yourself and chime in. Well, if not, the next part of the session is geared more toward, newer officials, JV officials, and it's covering the types of things that you pick up from watching color commentators on TV, particularly in the days before where you didn't have, Dean Blandino or whomever in the booth. I mean, in basketball, I don't know if they really have, your Mike Pereiras or Dean Blandinos on the broadcast that can explain rules. Instead, you just end up with, Dan Dockich or someone like that who doesn't have, is probably never opened a rule book. So we're going to cover some situations that come up far too often. And they're done because rules are misunderstood. The people in the crowd don't understand the rule and they start hooting and hollering for a call. And, coaches and players don't always know the rules too. And you'll know when they ask you a question. So the first rule myth that we're going to look at is a defensive player must be stationary to take a charge. And I can tell you last night, I called a blocking foul, and of course the guy comes up to me and goes, wasn't I set? And I go, well, that really doesn't have anything to do with it. You walked into the, you had guarding position, then you step forward into the shooter. So the rule of thumb, the rule here, and read through your block charge rule and your definition of legal guarding position. But once a player has legal guarding position, the defensive player can always move to maintain that guarding position. And, what is legal guarding position? It's a pretty simple explanation. It's 2 feet on the floor facing the opponent. Generally in between the opponent and where he wants to go. So once you get that legal guarding position as a defender, you can move laterally, or the term that, I don't know that anyone outside the military ever knows this, but or obliquely backwards to stay in the path of the dribbler. Now, obliquely just sort of basically means at an angle.
Yep.
And, backwards, not forward. So a defender who's, guarding can shuffle his feet and move side to side to stay in front of the player he's guarding. And if he's moving and there's contact because the dribbler goes into, well, if he's established legal guarding position and maintains it, you can have a charge call. one other rule of thumb here is a dribbler, if he gets his head and shoulders past the defender's torso, you're probably having a block. But if the dribbler's, head and shoulders hit the defender in the torso, then you're looking at a potential charge call. The other thing here is, a defensive player has the space vertically in his plane up till the ceiling. You can have a crash off the floor if the defensive player went straight up. He's maintained, or she has maintained, legal guarding position and can, in essence, block a shot or block the path of the, prevent the ball handler from getting a shot off, or even take a charge in midair. Midair charges are kind of rare. You probably need a push off from the offensive player, but get away from saying, if a player asks you or a coach asks you, wasn't he set? Don't say, no, he wasn't set. Say, no, he never had legal guarding position, or say he got beat to the spot. Get away from using terms like
Hey, but Jim, the
Yeah.
defender was moving. He was
Well-
moving. How can you call a charge?
well, coach, he had legal guarding position and he maintained it. And let the coach figure that one out. He stayed in front of the ball handler. And they'll scream at you, the crowd will scream at you, but that's the correct rule. Let's call it correctly. Don't take the path of least resistance and just call a blocking foul when the defender, does everything correctly. Here's another myth where the crowd will start screaming that a dribble above the dribbler's head is illegal. The crowd will always start screaming, particularly the lower level basketball where this stuff happens a lot. And there's no restriction on how high a dribbler can bounce the ball. As long as your hand stays on top of the ball, it's going to be a legal dribble. But that's one, you start doing middle school CYO, they'll all be screaming. Reaching in. Another one, they'll say, he's reaching in. Well, how the heck do you steal a basketball if you don't reach in? There's nothing wrong with reaching for the ball. It's just, is there illegal contact with your hands or arms? Are you knocking the dribbler's ball, arms away from the ball? Or are you hitting the ball? Just get away from using terminology like reaching in. It's a hand check. Or just say, he got him on the arm. Whatever. Just avoid using the term. Similarly, over the back. There's nothing in the rule book that says over the back. Doesn't appear anywhere. If a player is taller or a better jumper, he can go, we'll say outside position and go over the top and grab a rebound. There's a foul if the inside, the player with inside position or, advantageous position is displaced or prevented from jumping because the player behind maybe puts his hand on the shoulder to help him hold the guy down and jump. But, there's not such a call as over the back. Get away from it. Don't use the term anymore. Here's another favorite. You know, that a thrower in may not move. And fans, if he shuffles his feet a little, they might yell for traveling. Well, you can't travel when you're out of bounds. Just understand that the throw-in spot is 3 feet wide with unlimited depth. It goes until the guy can't back up anymore, until he runs into a wall, the stands, whatever. And as long as the thrower has 1 foot over that 3 foot wide spot, it's going to be a legal throw. And my sort of rule of thumb is they get like 1 shuffle step each way. If they're, maybe 2 shuffles, depending on how tall they are and how big those shuffles are. But it's a 3 foot wide spot.
Jim, is it 3 foot wide or is it 3 foot on either side of the spot?
3 foot wide. So 3 feet from the, basically the center of the thrower, from the thrower's nose when you hand them, him or her the ball. Or, you got basically 1.5 foot each way. So you got about, 1 big shuffle step each way where they'll still have, the trailing foot over the spot. And with that in mind, when you hand the thrower the ball, or bounce the throw the ball, don't say you can't move. They'll ask you if they can move. Just say no, it's a spot throw. Just say it's a spot throw-in. Don't tell them that they can't move. Just say spot throw-in. Now at the same time, every time they have just say after a timeout, where they, after a made basket or made free throw where a thrower can run the baseline, always give the signal. Wave your arm back and forth to show that they can run the baseline. Just to differentiate, but yeah, don't tell them they can't move. Let me just go back one more time to people who've signed in, amidst everything in the meeting, is use the chat feature to plug in your name and ID number for attendance purposes. Here's another myth that a player can't catch his own air ball. Well, that's an NBA rule. I think it still is. But there's, once a shot is released, a player can catch his or her own missed shot. It's a judgment call whether whether you think it's a legitimate shot, or a player is trapped maybe and is just quote unquote trying to pass the ball to himself. Again, this is something you'll see particularly if the younger the player you're doing, they'll throw up a lot of balls that just go straight up and come straight down into their hands. But it's not traveling. It's not a violation if you catch your own air ball. Next myth. Slapping the backboard is a technical foul. That is a complete myth. Now, if a player slaps the backboard because he's showboating, just trying to draw attention to himself, that's a technical. But if a player tries to block a shot, hits the backboard, or goes up for a rebound and hits the backboard, there's nothing illegal about that. Coaches might also scream for basket interference or goaltending because they'll say, well, the rim started vibrating. Well, read the rules on basket interference. Slapping the backboard is not going to be basket interference. It's important that you look up the definitions, of basket interference and goaltending. So you know what those are, and don't make a mistake. But in general, most of your backboard slaps come on block shot attempts. That's a nothing. Again, just focus on this. If the slap was done to showboat or, for a non-basketball reason, then you might have a technical foul on that play. But that might have happened once in my career. Another myth: if a pass that hits a player's foot or leg is a kicking violation. Well, again, a kick is an intentional act. You have to purposely kick at the ball. So if a offensive player's pass hits a defender in the foot, and the defender's stationary or just moving in the normal course of, gaining a position, it's going to be nothing. Just play on. If the defender or even an offensive player purposely moves his leg to contact the ball, then you have a kicking violation. This one I still see called even, by a fair number of varsity officials. And we need to get out of the habit of that. Again, it's got to be intentional on the part of the player, has to purposely be trying to hit the ball with his leg or foot. Another myth to forget is that a ball that's being bobbled or rolls across or on a ball handler's body is traveling. You'll see a lot of fumbled balls and passes that are bouncing around, and it's play on, and the one thing to know is the player can't travel unless he or she's holding the ball. They actually have to be holding the ball to travel, and the only exception is, and I don't know that again, this is something maybe you've seen twice, is if player's on the floor with the ball, puts the ball down on the floor, stands up, and then picks up the ball. That's the only time where you can have a traveling where a player isn't holding the ball. So, if the player is fumbling, bobbling, or it's bouncing, rolling all over, being batted around, it's a nothing. It's not traveling. Don't call that. The crowd will scream, coaches will scream, players on the bench, and it's just a loose ball. Here's one that I think only beginners, will call this, but dropping the ball isn't a dribble. Just like kicking the ball, dribbling is something that a player does intentionally. If a player drops the ball, muffs a pass, and it hits the floor, that's not a dribble. A dribble is something that someone does on purpose. So, let's not call a false double dribble because someone drops a pass, it hits the floor, they grab it, and then start a dribble. Or at the other end of the dribble, maybe they dribble and grab the ball and fumble it when they're trying to catch the ball at the end of their dribble, and it hits the floor again, they grab it. It's not a double dribble. Any dribble is intentional. It's not something that happens by accident. And that pretty wraps up the myths. I guess now, anyone have any questions about any of that or any plays they want to cover or anything? Stir some thoughts in anyone, so they have any questions.
Hey
Because of
Jim, I
that.
had something come up yesterday that was kind of interesting because we all know that you can't do the Hoosiers thing and play with less than 5, but I had a weird situation where the home team only had 8 players, and of course somebody's improperly equipped, so I have to send them out for a tick. And the coach tells me that the 3 players aren't eligible to play in that quarter. And then I didn't want to press the issue, so he just played with 4 for a couple of seconds until somebody could fall on and soon throw in and get him back in. And that was,
And that's fine. I mean, the rule is you have to start with 5. A team has to have 5 players on the floor to start the game. They don't have to finish with 5. They just have them there to start.
I mean, the only thing I can think of is that maybe they were 5 quarter players for the varsity game and they didn't want to burn them up. But as soon as he said they weren't eligible, I just didn't press the issue.
No, there's nothing wrong with that. You're not going to see it very often. Happens in junior college games where they only have 5 or 6 players on the team after the semester break and someone fouls out. But pretty rare in high school where teams have 10, 12, 15 players. Look, we're at the end of the season here, and I guess we just want to have sort of open questions for anyone anyone that had unusual plays. There's really no reason to keep anyone on too long here. It's just sort of a wrap-up session. A lot of people's seasons will end next week, who aren't working in the tournament. So feel free to chime in with any questions, or Bob Check or Malcolm Pennington as the signers. If there's anything you want to chip in with here at the end of the year, feel free to unmute yourself and say whatever you need to say.
Jim, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'd just like to thank everybody for everything they did this season. There were many times where some guys had to work 2 games in a row. Sometimes they had to work 3 games in a row because we were short guys for various reasons. So I just want to thank everybody for putting all that effort in. I know many times I got up on Monday morning, my legs were very sore. So thanks for all the, filling in all these extra games we had to do because many times we were short people. So, a heads up and a thanks to everybody. And just throw this out. Our next meeting is March 20th, and we need more baseball guys. So if anybody wants to work baseball, please let me know because we need more guys. Thanks.
Jim, for the last week or so, as I meet with captains on the varsity game, I will ask how many of them are seniors and just kind of put a plug in their ear that it's time for them to step up next year and start officiating. Let them know that they've had a great run in high school and it's time now for them to step up and do it. In fact, I worked a JV game yesterday and I asked the coaches to stay for a moment and said, hey, at your banquet, would you address the parents and ask them to start officiating? And maybe they can get their brothers or sisters or aunts or uncles, anybody like that, to start officiating. And the point I make with them is I don't even care if they officiate basketball. Maybe they prefer to do wrestling or football or softball or baseball or track or something like that. We need them in all sports. And I encourage the seniors who are graduating, if they're going away to school, it doesn't make any difference where they're going. We need them. So I think if we all do that, at the captain's meeting, just kind of put a little plug in their ear and hopefully something will catch on.
Hey, it's not a bad idea. I mean, if we all do that, we might catch 1 or 2 people total, but anyone we add is great. And that's not a bad thing to do at the captain's meetings. Or even, just talking to the coaches, saying, hey, if you have any players who, want to do this, if they're staying local for college or whatnot, get them involved. As I look, most people have their cameras off, but I know a lot of the people here, and it's not a young group. I'm 59 years old, and it's rare when I'm the oldest person on the crew. And it's not rare when I'm the youngest person on the crew. So,
Jim, lots of times I'll ask, particularly if I'm working a girls' game, I'll ask them, how many of your officials did not have white hair this year? And they usually say, well, maybe one or two. And then I say, well, how many times did you have a female official? And they all look at me to stare, and I, well, maybe once, I think. So I just try to encourage them. We need young females to start officiating. And as far as going away to school, I tell them, I don't care if you're going to Saginaw, they need officials there. If you're going to school someplace in Indiana, they need officials there. So just get started.
Yeah.
Hey, Jim,
Hey, Dennis.
could I comment on Mr. Check?
Sure.
He mentioned sore legs on a Monday morning. I think the result of that would only be because the bar stools are so tight at the Red Coat. He had to sit in an uncomfortable position all weekend long with his legs bent sideways or something, and then wakes up Monday morning with sore legs. So I just wanted to set the record straight.
It's not from running at the CYO game. We know that.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Any questions, plays? I mean, there's no such thing as a stupid question or a stupid play. If you're, less experienced official, we've got a lot of veterans here to help you out. So,
Hey, Jim.
Yeah.
Jim, I didn't get to sign on until about 6:45, but did you discuss tournament assignments in the beginning at all?
We have not discussed tournament assignments.
Did anybody? I was sent 5 games in the boys, and the nearest one of the 5 was 62 miles from my house. The nearest one. One was 82 miles at a place I never even heard of, Richmond, Michigan. I don't even know where it is. I just Googled it and it was 82 miles. So I sent those 5 games back. Did other people experience the same thing? Or is my reputation caught up with me and they got to send me that far?
Well, maybe a little both, but
I experienced it. I have a game that's 62 miles away for districts.
yeah. I mean,
I've talked with a lot of guys that's the similar situation. But for me, I'm in Clarkston. I got Clarkston, and then we got Notre Dame Prep.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. All right.
I mean, I have some close to home. I have some far from home. It varies. What I've been told is that Will McCoy did the assignments this year, and he's never done the basketball assignments. Brent Rice was let go, who was, the assistant director in charge of officiating. And they've had a bit of a scramble up there. I don't really want to make excuses for them because, officials are always kind of an afterthought, I think, of, some people have tough rides. Some people have, it happens every year that people, some people unfortunately have too many bad drives or are put on games where they listed a conflict where they can't work because their kids go to school or they used to coach there or whatever. It's
Deal with it, right?
It's unfortunate. And yeah, maybe it just is too far where it's not worth your while because, what they give us 40 cents a mile or something for over 50-mile round trip. So at 62 miles, you're looking at 124-mile round trip. So, 40 cents a mile doesn't really cover your costs.
Oh,
I know, I
driving
said-
that far.
Yeah, I sent them back, so but I was curious
Yeah.
if that happened with, yeah. All right, thank you.
I mean, it's one of the shame is that one of the big shames is, we get paid for varsity game. Most of the leagues are paying 75 around Detroit. There's some of the charter schools are paying 80, and you get out to, Ann Arbor or, some of the more outlying places are paying more. But now we get into the tournament and the fee's down to 70, which doesn't make a lot of sense that for the most important games, they're paying less. But, that's the way it is. And, I'd be hopeful now that there's such a shortage of officials that the schools and the MHSA will, succumb to some pressure to raise the rates. I mean, frankly, I think that's one way to get new people into officiating is to make it more worthwhile. Make it a little more monetarily rewarding to get some new people in.
Well, while we're on the assignment aspect, do we know if they've done regional assignments yet?
Regional assignments are out for boys and girls. I don't know that anything beyond that's been assigned yet.
Interesting. Okay.
Darwin, if they hold to their pattern, probably this Friday, they will release the rest of the tournament assignments, I would think.
Well, I'll be honest. I haven't got any, which is the first time, and I don't know how long.
Maybe you're getting something bigger.
That would be sweet, but we'll see. It's just unusual where we haven't seen the regional assignment.
It's a different assigning year for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
without doubt. Without doubt.
I mean, it is strange because normally, these assignments like the girls' districts came out way earlier than they used to, as did the boys' districts. And the regionals, it's just things are being done differently than past practice. That's all I can
Absolutely.
say.
Yep. I've seen that.
How decisions are made is a great mystery to all of us, but
Yeah. Well, hey, while we got it out here, I'll just say I appreciate, you, Rick, Mr. Buys, and of course we got our signers on here too. So Bob, I don't know why you guys do what you do, but we appreciate it.
anything else anyone wants to say just as a season wrap up here? I guess I'll just
I
say
got
this
one
for-
thing, Jim. I
Go
got
ahead.
one thing. I say this all the time at the meetings, but feel good about what you did this year. It's you've accomplished a big thing just getting through this season. And whether they would admit it or not, the coaches, the fans, the players, all appreciate it on some level. Not all of them, some of them. But great. Thanks for all you do, guys.
Yeah, and again, any of the newer officials, you have questions, rules, questions, situations you want to go over. I know Rick, myself, Shane, and any number of other veteran officials, we will, take your calls, your texts, your emails. Don't be shy. We want to help everyone improve and advance as officials. And, if even after the season, things come up that you realize you want to ask about, by all means ask. Otherwise, I'll just tell everyone this will be our shortest meeting. We'll get out of here in under an hour. But have a strong finish in the last couple games. And And for those of you, working the tournament, and we'll see who goes deep in the tournament. Good luck, and hope everything works out. And like Bob Check said, if you want to start doing baseball, he's got a full schedule waiting for you.